The inception of the Indian press is a fascinating journey, filled with unique characteristics and a diverse range of languages. In the beginning, the Indian press was often a one-man show. It was common for the same person to be the editor, owner, and publisher. These editor-proprietors scattered across the country not only managed their newspapers, but also penned nearly all the articles themselves. Most of these papers were modest in size, no more than double sheets, with a few ambitious ones extending up to 6 sheets. The first newspapers were a marvel of multilingualism, a testament to the linguistic diversity of India. These publications were predominantly in vernacular languages, with a few being bilingual or even trilingual. Even though a newspaper typically published in the regional language, almost every region had at least one newspaper in a different vernacular language. Interestingly, editorials held less significance in the early days of the Indian press. A newspaper would establish its stance on an issue through a series of articles, rather than a single editorial piece. The reputation of these vernacular journals was built upon the articles they published, and the individuals associated with those articles, not on their editorials. The early contributors to these newspapers weren't professional writers, but well-known individuals who wrote without monetary motivation. They were either friends of the editors, writing at their urgent request, or individuals with a zeal to voice their opinions on contentious issues. Despite the enthusiasm and dedication of these early press pioneers, the circulation of these vernacular newspapers was limited. High postal rates restricted their distribution to local or nearby areas. Sometimes the newspapers would distribute several copies of each issue for free, driven by a cause they passionately supported. So, the beginnings of the Indian press were characterized by a sole ownership model, with a single person often playing multiple roles. This was the first chapter in the rich and diverse history of the Indian press, setting the stage for the evolution that was yet to come. One of the most striking features of the Indian press in its early days was its remarkable variety. This variety was not just in terms of content, but also in terms of language. The Indian press was a rich tapestry of vernacular languages. Newspapers were published in multiple languages, not just the regional language. In fact, some newspapers were unilingual, others bilingual, and some even trilingual. The multilingual nature of the Indian press was a testament to the linguistic diversity of the country. It was a mirror that reflected the myriad languages spoken across its vast expanse. But it was more than just a reflection. It was a tool that facilitated communication and cultural exchange among different linguistic communities. But the early Indian press was not just about the languages it used. It was also about the content it published. And this is where it differed from the press as we know it today. The emphasis was not on editorials, as is often the case now. Instead, the focus was on articles. These articles were the platform where a newspaper would take a stand on an issue. They were the medium through which a newspaper would express its viewpoint. These articles were not just pieces of news, they were statements. They were declarations of the newspaper's stance on various issues. They were the voice of the newspaper. And it was through these voices that the early Indian press made itself heard. The early Indian press was a fascinating mix of languages and content. It was a vibrant platform where different languages came together and different viewpoints were aired. It was a place where articles took precedence over editorials. It was a place where the focus was not just on delivering news, but also on taking a stand on issues. Thus, the early Indian press was a vibrant mix of languages and content, with a focus on articles over editorials. This focus on articles over editorials was a unique feature of the early Indian press. It was a feature that set it apart from the press of other countries. And it was a feature that continues to influence the Indian press even today. Like any new venture, the early Indian press faced its share of challenges. The press in its nascent stages was marked by limited circulation. The newspapers of the 70s led a hand-to-mouth existence, with high postal rates restricting their reach to local or nearby areas. Enthusiasm for a cause sometimes prompted the managers to distribute several copies free of charge. However, There were also instances where journals ceased to exist simply because their subscribers discontinued payment. Contributors to the early press were few and far between, and they weren't driven by monetary incentives. These contributors, often friends of the editors or individuals with a missionary zeal, would write on controversial issues out of passion, not pay. The chance of these contributors being paid was slim, underscoring the meager resources that the early press had at its disposal. Dependency on aid was another challenge. Many newspapers relied on assistance from local rajas, philanthropic citizens, friends, and even the government. Local governments subsidized several vernacular journals, subscribing to a fixed number of copies and distributing them among schools and offices. This dependency on outside support reflected the financial constraints of the early press. The early Indian press also had to navigate the complex political landscape of the time. They frequently found themselves battling libel suits brought forth by the government against the owner-editor. The press was not just a vehicle for news, but also a platform for dissent and debate, which often put them at odds with the authorities. The vernacular press, in particular, was viewed with suspicion by the ruling authorities. When the Vernacular Press Bill was read in the Viceroy's Council at Calcutta in 1878, one of the points most emphasized was the danger of these vernacular papers being commonly read out in the bazaars, reflecting the fear of the press's power to influence public opinion. Despite these challenges, the early Indian press persevered, laying the foundation for the diverse and vibrant media landscape we see in India today. The early Indian press has left a lasting legacy on the country's media landscape. It was not just about reporting news, but it was also an embodiment of resilience, a beacon of linguistic diversity, and a platform for public discourse. The multilingual nature of the early press fostered a sense of unity in diversity, as it catered to a wide range of linguistic communities, promoting regional languages alongside English. The early press was also a battleground, a space where the freedom of speech was constantly tested against governmental pressures. It was a platform that fostered critical thinking and promoted public discourse. It was a place where ordinary citizens could voice their opinions, debate on issues of public interest, and hold the government accountable. Many of today's journalistic practices find their roots in the early Indian press, and despite its many challenges, it paved the way for a more robust, dynamic, and diverse media landscape. In conclusion, the early Indian press, with its unique features and challenges, played a crucial role in shaping India's journalistic landscape.